Welcome to a special series on the CultureCon podcast.
These episodes feature conversations originally recorded live at CultureCon 2024 and first released on the People Forward Network's podcast, Fringe.
The response to these interviews was so strong, we wanted to bring them home and share them directly with you.
You'll hear real stories, insights, and inspiration from CultureCon speakers, sponsors, and attendees captured in the moment right at the conference.
Let's dive in.
Vibhas Ratanjee, you are with us to talk about Gallup and what it is to build a strength-based culture. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've heard people mention Gallup during this conference, and I use it a great deal in terms of my research as well. But tell us about your workshop and what you'll be presenting today.
And we tend to be kind of perhaps the single source of workplace insights, I'd say, or at least the most prominent ones. And the reason for that is because we do a lot of research pretty much year long, every day. We're in workplaces, we're asking questions about the state of the workplace, the future of the workplace, and so on. My focus today, and this is the second time I'm at CultureCon and call myself an honorary member.
Welcome back.
But it's just brilliant to be here. And I'm going to be focused on strengths-based cultures. Mm-hmm. Strengths is something, if you know Gallup, you know that one of the main things we've done is kind of created this instrument called CliftonStrengths that tells you what your strengths are, as opposed to where most people fixate, which is their weaknesses.
Yeah.
But how does that kind of pertain to a culture? Because sometimes strengths is so individual, like it's who you are. How can an organization create a culture that is focused on strengths? It's focused on the affirmative. It's focused on the positive.
Oh, I would love to drill down on that before I get to my own Clifton Strength Finders. Because it's a human thing to focus on the negative.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, when you talk about focusing on the positive, like what's the challenge that you face in helping leaders move in that way?
It's interesting. So I've been doing this for a fairly long time, almost 30 years, kind of working with organizations. About 23 years now with Gallup. And the big shift I saw when I moved from my earlier role into Gallup, earlier I was doing a lot of work around process redesign and process engineering and customer service and so on and so forth. And I saw that pretty much every approach that we were using in our consulting prior to Gallup that I observed was deficit-based.
Yeah.
Which is always trying to find out what's wrong, kind of like
a pathology.
A pathology. It's the disease mentality,
yes,
right?
Yes.
It's like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Or what's wrong with us?
Yes.
Or what's wrong with our system? Or what's wrong with the process?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the old root cause analysis of failure.
Yeah.
And what I learned after I moved to Gallup all these years ago, 23 years ago, is how about a root cause analysis of success?
Yes.
Because in every system, in every process, in every individual, and in every organization, there's a lot that works. Focusing on that and amplifying that is a better success strategy than obsessing over what's wrong. And I think a lot of consulting these days is built around what's wrong. Yeah. And I think about culture. And a lot of companies come in and say, hey, let's do an audit of your culture and let's try to find out what's wrong with you so we can fix it. You don't get very far with that. But think about a positive, energizing culture, a strengths-based culture that is engaging, that creates enthusiasm. And I mean, we need a lot of that these days in the workplace.
I love what you just said. And what popped into my mind as you were speaking, I'm a Love Scholar practitioner, and I use a framework that is built off of the word loving as the loving leader. And the G in the loving leader framework is gift. And it is the reminder that we are gifts. Mm-hmm. And that the people we work with are gifts. And so as you were speaking, I'm like, yeah, that's the gift piece. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting as we talked about the pathology and the focusing on the negative, that so much of even our society is so focused on fixing other people's problems, as opposed to starting with the giftedness. And so I do think that's really powerful. I mean, I will say, though, like to support the work, I know that I took Clifton Strength Finders maybe 4.5 years ago. And when I tell you, it gave me language for the person that I am. It gave me such clarity about how different parts of me were integrated, and in a way to show me how I could be a contributor to a team. But it also did help me think about how those strengths might bump up against somebody else's humanity. But I do think that's really powerful. And I will say that it definitely transformed how I showed up as a leader, like understanding that I was strategic and connected, that those were my number one and number two, and that I was also an ideator and a relator and a learner. Like, I'm like, yeah, that's me. And one, it also helps me help people understand who I am. And just being able to have language, the common language to share. Yeah, I love that. Any particular tips that you offer in your workshop today?
Before I do that, I love what you said about gifts, because I think that's so true. It's almost like we're saying everyone's gifted, right? Everyone has talent. Sometimes when you think about talent, you think about a rock star or a sports star and so on, but everybody has some talent. Everybody has these gifts. I'd say it's what you make of your gifts, and are you in an environment that appreciates, respects, and acknowledges your gifts?
That's right.
Are you in a culture that focuses on your gifts, which are your strengths, let's say? I'll give you a statistic, which is quite alarming. Right now, we actually ask this question, do you have the opportunity to do what you do best at work? Which is, are you actually using your gifts? Every day, actually. Why wouldn't you use your gifts every day if they are gifts?
Right.
And the number there is about only 1 in 3 employees
I knew it was going to be low. It's going to be low.
I don't want to be the harbinger of bad news. It seems every time I come to CultureCon, people say, do you have any good news? Well, I do have some good news today, but I think this is quite disconcerting when you think about, are we creating cultures that benefit the organization and revenue and value and customers and all of that? Or are you actually setting people up for success focused on their gifts so they can drive that value? The individual is the focus of culture, not, well, the organization sure is, but the organization is benefiting, but you can't go very far unless you have engaged employees who are connected to the culture of the company.
That's right. That's right. You know, we're having a conversation here casually too. You know, my premise is that if we actually saw people as gifts, as if we were loving leaders in the way we managed people, because that's my focus is really on those who are people leaders, that there would be a greater value creation as we unlock people's creativity, people's strengths, people's passion, that all of that life force energy that comes from those. And the person I was talking to, I said, like, think about from a GDP perspective, how much greater it would be if we were all showing up with our strengths and the value creation that would then be the output together. And I said, think about like whatever we're producing now is just not enough. And they were like, yeah, it's probably 30%. And so it's so close to your 1 in 3 when you think about that there's just so much value that is unrealized because we are not focusing on the strengths of the humans that are on our teams.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's powerful. Powerful. Okay, so give us a little inside look into your presentation today.
Yeah, so we're a research-based consulting firm, so we are going to share some of our research, which I think is very pertinent to share right now in a conference like this, where you have so many practitioners who are focusing on culture. I'm going to talk about 4 things, which I think will be useful. Think of them as almost like 4 strategies if you want to build a strengths-based culture. The first one really is to kind of, I love when you said love. It's actually to love yourself, I think to start with, which I think aligns very well with what both of us work on, which is just who are you? I mean, love your strengths to start with. That doesn't mean that you can let go of your weaknesses and so on. So my number 1 theme is ideation. If you're familiar with CliftonStrengths, there are 34. And I have learned to love my ideation themes and to make sure that I focus on my ideation and create more for myself opportunities, including being here, to use my ideation in a way, right? My number 34 theme, because a lot of people kind of say, hey, what about your weaknesses? It's empathy, by the way. So I remember the first time 23 years ago, when I took the Strengths Finder, and it was called the Strengths Finder then, and I went to my wife and said, can you believe it? They think empathy is number 34 for me. I remember she looked at me and said, did you actually need a test to tell you that? So, like, okay, that tells me something. So I've kind of it's not that I've grown in my empathy, but I've realized it's not that empathy is not something I can do, but it's not something I do best. So I've
And it's
kind of, that's
awareness
one.
now.
It's awareness, right? I think that's one kind of key theme. The second one is actually, it's interesting. It's find out what's weird about you. So I think everybody has something that is weird, which is unique, which is valued. So what's
Yeah.
weird? I come from Austin, Texas, so it's staying weird is what we do. So I think
I love
that's-
Austin, by the way.
Yeah, that's the second one, I think. The third one, I think, is an important one, which is really around focus on individualization and not categorization. It's enough that we kind of, you're this category, you're this and that. It's like, who are you as an individual is a more pertinent question to ask. And the last one, which I think right now is really important, is kind of, I'm calling it feeding feedback, which is at the end of the day, a culture of strengths is where you are actually focusing on feedback and having meaningful conversations and doing that very, very consistently as a manager.
Yeah.
These 4 strategies, I think, get to the heart of what it means to build a strengths-based culture.
Yeah, I love that. That's super awesome. And, I think when you talk about feeding feedback, I feel like that's one of the things I've heard most consistently is challenging in organizations, that people don't know where they stand. And speaking of data, one of the data points that I came across recently is, because I'm a love practitioner, I'm very focused on what creates fear in the workplace. And the number one thing that was in this survey was that 68% agreed or strongly agreed that what their managers thought of them is what actually cultivated fear for them. And that is so tied to what you're saying about feedback. And so feedback too is a gift.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't come naturally to all managers. Managers need to learn how to give feedback, both positive as well as critical feedback as well. Let's not say we don't need that at all. But I think a lot of our research is showing that managers feel they're giving feedback, but employees don't think they're receiving it. So,
Well, I think it's, is it great? That doesn't, it's not necessarily qualitative, right?
Yeah.
So do you have an example of what good feedback might look like?
Yeah, I mean, strengths-based feedback is awesome, because when you say, hey, here's what I saw you do, here's what it says about who you are as an individual, pairing recognition with feedback, because if you think about strengths, there are certain behaviors you're approaching, you're kind of observing in your coaching, and you're saying, hey, I saw you kind of come up with these ideas. How can I help you come up with more of these ideas? Rather than saying, I don't think you dealt with this situation with a lot of empathy. Let me actually send you to empathy school, and then you'll be more empathetic. So, I mean, that's the thing. It's feedback is individualized. That's the best kind of feedback, rather than motherhood and apple pie feedback. Like, hey, you did well or you didn't. Or,
Yeah.
So I think managers need to hone this ability to do feedback much better.
Yeah. And just saying you suck is not going to be helpful either.
Yes, absolutely. That is actually not feedback. It's telling
right.
people what they're doing wrong is not
That's right.
feedback.
That's right. That's right. But to your point from the beginning, right? We are so focused on the negative that tends to be when we think we ought to give feedback, to amplify what we don't think is great, as opposed to amplifying to the strengths that we see.
Yeah.
It just pulls all your strategy together to the individualized way. This is how I see you. And, from a loving leader perspective, letting people know that they're seen is critical. So how powerful is that? Just to be able to use feedback as an opportunity to not only help amplify the strengths of somebody, but also allow them to feel like they really belong and that they're seen and they're valued. It's super powerful. So I love that. Any other sneak peeks you want to add about your breakout session?
I love that you're talking about love.
Aw,
and
thanks.
I want to share one more thing, which I think is connected to that. So I work with many organizations. One organization and a leader that I think inspires me, Southwest Airlines. They call themselves a strengths-based airline. So I worked with Gary Kelly, who is the ex-CEO of Southwest, and I wrote an article on the work I did with him and the conversations I had with him. And the article is Leadership with Love, because LUV is Southwest Airlines New York Stock Exchange ticker, LUV, and Love Field is in Dallas is where they operate from. And what I love about Southwest is just that the entire organization is centered around strengths. They're focused around what is good with their employees, what makes them. Southwest has gone through a lot of challenges, but I think what makes them truly resilient is that they're a strengths-based airline.
Yeah.
That they go through that adversity, but what shines through is their ability to engage, their ability to connect. So I think that's a really inspirational leader, and many others who've done that from a strengths-based approach. But you're transforming your culture not by just putting up words on the wall and encouragement. Here's who we are, here's our culture. But you're doing it in a much more meaningful way by activating the strengths in every individual that works there. So I think that's a big one that most organizations can gain from.
I love it. I love it. So I just have one more question, because I kind of am a geek in terms of I love the data. I'm just curious, what's like, other than the 33% that you've already shared, the 1 in 3, is there any other fun fact that you'd love to share with the audience?
I'll tell you 2 other metrics or indicators that keep me up at night that I worry about a lot. One is engagement, because we've been measuring engagement for a fairly long time. Right now, it's 30% of U.S. employees are engaged.
Yeah. That's like been the number one quoted data point
it is.
Across this conference.
And it's dropping. It's dropping. And that's the key over a period of time. The other one, which is we started doing a lot of work on culture, and this one really keeps me up at night. So when we ask a question, do you feel connected to the culture of your company? The number is about 20 to 21%. When we ask leaders, it's closer to 60%. And people say, hey, individuals much lower at about 18 to 19%. And so people say, hey, look at the difference between leaders and employees. And, what can we do there? And my first question is, 67% of leaders are connected to the culture. That's the problem. Like, if you are not connected to the culture of your company, how can you be a leader? It should be 100%.
Yeah.
That's one that is, I think, to really drive success around culture, it starts with leadership.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. Oh my goodness, those are crazy data points. I was thinking as you were sharing them that we need more people at CultureCon.
Oh, for sure.
Right? Like, duh.
Yes.
The first thing I was thinking. But I'm also thinking of my lived experience with other leaders, and I'm thinking about what's really in that 67%. One of the questions that I received yesterday from the audience was the professed behavior versus the actualized behavior. So like, I'm curious how much of that 67% is real, is as opposed to professed. And then also, I'd be so curious of the 20% that you mentioned, how that actually pans out by Gen Z versus millennials versus Gen X versus boomers. I'm just curious because if the aggregate is 20, 30, what would even it be by Gen Z?
That's a hot topic. That's a really hot topic. Something I've been researching for a fairly long time. So Gen Z, the future, lowest level of engagement, highest level of burnout, highest level of stress, completely adrift in this future workplace we are talking about. I got Gen Z kids as well, so I can kind of know. I'm worried about my kids as well, about what kind of workplace, what kind of culture they live in. It was really interesting. I saw a research study that said that about 47% of Gen Z employees think they get better career advice from ChatGPT and AI than from their own managers. When you think about that, like, is that what are we going to substitute human touch and emotions with a bunch of code? That's what worries me. Now, artificial intelligence and AI and ChatGPT, we know it's going to transform the world. But there is more of an opportunity I call it augmented leadership. If you think about augmented reality, how can our leaders use AI to benefit people who are going to drive success for the organization, especially the new generations who are increasingly going to be tech savvy? But because they're so stressed out and burnt out, what they really need is human connection. Let's not forget that.
Well, what makes us human is love.
Yeah.
And that is what a machine can't duplicate or replicate. And I want to bring it back to your whole focus of this topic is about strengths-based leadership. What would it look like for us to exemplify leadership that looks at the strengths of Gen Z?
That's right.
And figures out how to bring those strengths to create value in our organizations? Like, how powerful would that be?
It needs a mindset shift. And it needs to start with leadership, like I said.
Yeah.
They need to spark a strengths revolution. And that's what Gallup is doing in all our work is we kind of pioneered this whole strengths-based as an approach. Don Clifton, who created CliftonStrengths, was the inventor of CliftonStrengths. And I think he had an aspiration for about 1 million or so people to take CliftonStrengths. And we are millions of people around the world. Our goal, our long-term mission is to get 1 billion people to know their strengths.
Yeah.
And imagine what that world will look like when people are focusing on what's right, what humanity will look like when people are focusing on what's right versus what's wrong.
Yeah. Oh, and to know that they are gifts. Thank you so much. This was such a delightful conversation. I can't wait to see your breakout session.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
That's a wrap on this episode of the official CultureCon podcast.
If you got something out of it, share it with a friend, a teammate, or a fellow culture geek.
And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode.
And if you want more ways to stay connected and inspired, check out our upcoming events page for a full listing of webinars, workshops, and conferences.
You'll find the link in the show notes, and we'd love to welcome you to a CultureCon event soon.
Until next time,